What's good, friends? Welcome into Fantasy Focus Football, presented by Wingstop, alongside Mike Clay and a Natalie-clad Field Yates. My name is Daniel Dopp. Very excited here to be able to bring to you some fun Wednesday content.
Daniel,
why are you dressed up?
Well, I'm here to manage your investment portfolio because I feel like between the tie and the shirts and also the slicked back hair today, it is my calling in life to tell you whether to buy, sell, short, or anything in between. More seriously, I had a mock draft that dropped.
Yes, you did.
On ESPN.com. Somehow the Lions and the Eagles both have pick 32 because they're both going to win the Super Bowl. It's actually using the current order based off of records. So neither team is picking 32. The Lions
better
are
picks.
18. Yep.
We thought we would.
When I read through the mock draft, which I actually did, I was shocked to see. Yes. I was shocked to see that the Kansas City Chiefs currently have the 14th pick of the first round.
They sure do. And keep in mind, they play the Chargers and the Broncos, plus games with the Titans and the Raiders over the final 4 weeks.
Yeah. Very exciting. You gave my defense or my Detroit Lions a player that I would very much be okay with. We got a couple of fantasy guys in the top 5 as well, a couple quarterbacks and a wide receiver. I don't want to give it all away. Make sure you go check it out on the interwebs. But a very good mock draft that came out.
Yeah.
I think actually Field just like has more time to get dressed up because like he doesn't have to set lineups anymore, check waivers anymore.
That's what it is.
More time.
Shot to the heart. Boom! I can't sing because I think we get fined.
We would.
Shout out Bon Jovi. I actually am doing TV. I had TV early this morning, so my kids do wake up very, very, very early. That being said, I didn't want to disrupt the house too much by like waking up, grabbing a bunch of clothes. Like I just got up, I got dressed, and I zipped out of the house as soon as possible for early TV this morning, and that left me here for a while. So I've been sitting in the studio for like an hour and a half waiting for you.
Oh my gosh, that's a long time. Well, make sure you go check out Field's mock draft. Won't take you an hour and a half to read through it, but there's a lot of good things in there. Very excited to be able to have the first one drop. I was just going to say, we're going to have to start learning these guys' names for some of the fantasy people we'll need to know. So go check that out. Also, really quickly, Mike, you did kind of like spoil the lead here, but you made the Fantasy Focus playoffs. I just want to give you the table here. First day on the show this week. How you feeling about making the playoffs?
I feel good about it. I made a big trade a couple weeks ago with Quentin and acquired Amon-Ra St. Brown and R.J. Harvey in that deal, and both of those have worked out. I traded away Bucky Irving, who's had one good, one down game. But, that trade so far, although it looked like it was going to be bad initially because St. Brown immediately got hurt and got me a 0, but got past both of you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Unfortunately.
But I feel like my team is in a good spot for the playoffs. So the lineup's solid. So
it is solid.
We will we'll see if we can make a run at it. We have some quality teams.
Heck yeah. I love that. Well, it's going to be very fun today. On today's show, we're going to dive into players that we believe could define the fantasy playoffs, and we wanted to leave that fairly open-ended. Defining the fantasy playoffs could be in a good way, could be in a bad way.
Oh, yeah.
We left it very open for us to be able to interpret it however we want. However, before we dive in, I want to give a couple of quick shout-outs. First, to our friends over at Trophy Smack. Use the promo code FOCUS10 over at TrophySmack.com for 10% off your order over at Trophy Smack. And shout out to our buddy Eric Moody, hanging out in the YouTube chat right now. Follow him on social media at Eric N. Moody and ask him all of your playoff questions. Before we get started with our official news, guys, we had some news last night as Philip Rivers officially signed with the Indianapolis Colts.
Sure did.
I talked about this with Field a little bit yesterday. Yes, practice squad. Mike, as the projection guy, what are you expecting moving forward? Have you already started to think about within your model what these Colts would look like if Philip Rivers was potentially under center?
When I got to campus today, actually, I got here early too. I didn't tell anyone.
I'm Mike Clay, and I make the Fantasy Focus League playoffs, and I get here early.
Well, I came in early because I had to go down to the archives, to the basement of ESPN headquarters to find some old stats of Philip Rivers.
That's right.
What he did, because he was deactivated in our fantasy database because he's been gone for so long.
Back in the day.
Exactly, yeah. We had to get the newspapers to pull his stats each day. So, I did have to open like a bigger old file, but it doesn't really matter. Like, it's been so long. I mean, we know what we know about Philip Rivers. He's 44. He's not going to do much with his legs at this point. Yep. He's going to be a pocket passer. And honestly, from our perspective, if he does start this week, which is a possibility with the injuries to Riley Leonard and, of course, Daniel Jones out for the season, what we want is like 11 targets for Michael Pittman.
Joe
Tyler
Flacco.
Warren.
That's what we want.
Exactly right. And I don't know if we're going to get that from a guy that hasn't played for this long. And how long has it been since the guy's had this level of absence?
2020 is crazy.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So I am pessimistic that this is going to go well for this team, but I'm hopeful that he can at least pepper these guys with targets, because I'm really nervous about Pittman and flex options like Downs and Pierce and Tyler Warren as well. Are these guys going to be startable during the fantasy playoffs? I'll tell you what, I don't really have him ranked like that this week. I have Warren as a fringe starter. I have Pittman buried down near 40. Pierce and Downs way off the radar. Jonathan Taylor downgraded from where we've had him earlier this season. The hope there is that they run it 25 times with regardless of the quarterback.
More to come on Jonathan Taylor throughout this show.
Yeah, so we'll get to that. But anyway, I'm very, very nervous about the potential fantasy output for the Colts offense.
No doubt about it. I mean, I was doing NFL Live yesterday, and we had Dan Orlovsky and Marcus Pierce and Mina Kimes on the show. And Dan and Marcus, of course, played in the NFL, both guys who are relatively close to the age of Phillip Rivers. And they were dubious just from their own, how they feel right now, right? They're like, are you kidding me? Is this the most desperate times? Call for desperate measures things ever. Mina and I have similar skepticism, but the answer is yes. I mean, it's there are no other leaves to turn over right now because we're past the trade deadline. It's not like there are a bunch of good quarterbacks just hanging around in December, because if there were good quarterbacks hanging around in December, they would have been signed a long time ago. So yeah, it's amazing, amazing theater. Dude. That's what I keep saying. It's unbelievable theater. I will watch this game very intently.
I can't
My
wait.
question is, will Phillip Rivers play any better in Seattle against this defense than Max Brosmer played a few weeks ago in his first career NFL start?
I don't know, but I hope that he does do a little bit of that Jameis, Joe Flacco, whatever, just the YOLO ball.
Yeah.
Why not? I mean, I don't know at his age if he's going to be picking apart defenses, right? He still has to learn this playbook and everything and be injected right into the NFL if they're missing so many years. But let's just hope he's not afraid to chuck it downfield. Just play aggressive football, because that's, again, I'm putting my fantasy football Michael Pittman is on my roster hat here.
Your manager hat on. That's right.
And that's honestly probably best for the Colts too, because they need something. They just need to get remember Nick Foles taking the Eagles to a Super Bowl. That's kind of what he did. He just was so aggressive, and it worked out great for them at the time. You just have to hope variance goes your way.
Yeah. We got a couple of questions here from our chat already about this topic. Already, we're diving in. This one comes from Riley Nagel, wants to know, do I dare say Phillip Rivers has memories of Gates in Warren this weekend? Is there a chance that Antonio Gates could be the idea? Yeah, he's thinking of Tyler Warren being the Antonio Gates of this Phillip Rivers-led offense. Or
stick with Stranger Things, and Duval was the other side of that equation there. So if you have the option between Tyler Warren and Brenton Strange, would you? He kind of came back down to earth last week pretty harshly. It's close.
I have Warren higher still.
So do I.
I think they will find ways to manufacture touches for him. He'll carry the ball.
Oh, he will touch the ball that way. You're right. Brenton Strange isn't going to potentially carry the ball or have snaps under
center. They're playing the Jets, who've been okay against tight ends. This is a brutal matchup, but wide receivers are going to have a hard enough time in this matchup. Warren could see 5, 6, 7 touches or opportunities in this game. I'm still. I look. I moved him down. We usually have him top 5. I'm at 10, so he's a borderline starter, but I do have him quite a ways ahead of Brenton Strange.
Well, one last thing, just in case you were wondering where Phillip Rivers ranks all time, he has been a pretty good quarterback, as you'll be able to see by the full screen we're going to throw up here, because he has been unbelievable. All-time scoring leaders, 1 through 7 here in fantasy football. And you look at this list: Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Jerry Rice, Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, Brett Favre, Ben Roethlisberger, all over 4,000 fantasy points.
Unbelievable.
And then 8 through 14. Stafford, Larry Fitzgerald, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers comes in at number 11 right now with 3,812 fantasy points, just ahead of Russell Wilson, Emmitt Smith, and some guy named Dan Marino, who was pretty good at quarterback.
So quick math here means that we need just about 22.4 fantasy points for Phillip Rivers to surpass Matt Ryan for 10th all time, which I would argue is a pretty illustrious
it's in the bag
career achievement to add to the many other career achievements for Phillip Rivers. Mm-hmm. Does he get 22.5, let's call it 22.5 fantasy points the rest of the season?
That's a good
rest of the season, yes.
Well, whether he plays one game or the rest of the season, he has that option, right? So I say the answer is yes as well. It might take him 3 games.
Do you think the Colts called Matt Ryan as well, just to see if either one of them? They just called everyone on that list. Just
hey Matt, I know you're probably busy with the production meeting right now, CBS.
Yes,
but,
yes, seriously.
Nobody is more content right now with their life than Andrew Luck. I say that with
seems pretty
absolute respect for what he has found, his happiness he has found out there as the Stanford GM.
Heck yeah, man. That's what we're all searching for in life, guys. All right, let's talk about some players that will define the fantasy playoffs field. Like I said, we left this really open-ended to be interpreted however we want. I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, the idea was just like, it's whatever way you want to take this. Who is going to define the fantasy playoffs? So I think we each have somewhere between 4, 5, 6 names and different categories. We didn't have to all pick from the same categories, but I kind of categorized my players based off of what motivated me to include them in the show. I think if you were to ask the potential playoff MVP, the most obvious answer is Christian McCaffrey.
Yep.
Right? He has been the highest scoring player in fantasy this year. He has as much upside as any player in a given week. I'm going to go past Christian McCaffrey, though, for a second option as the potential playoff MVP. It's Devon Achane for the Miami Dolphins, who sometimes on this show, just because we're trying to give you advice that's also actionable, we move a little bit past the guys that just meet expectations at the very top. What's there to say about Devon Achane in a Week 7 preview show? Hey, he's awesome. He's running back 3 for me this week.
That's it.
But as we get to this inflection point of the season, the beginning of the playoffs, worth highlighting the greatness of Devon Achane, who one time over the last 6 games was so bad he scored 16.6 fantasy points.
Is that the
I know.
worst?
He's on my FF Now team. I was really disappointed in him.
Yeah, that one time that he scored 16.6 fantasy points. How about this? Last week, he didn't even play that much in the second half, and he had 17.5 fantasy points. As a matter of fact, he didn't play at all in the second half. He had a game, over the past 2 weeks. This is the part that I think just illustrates how dominant he has been over the past 2 games, which is really 1.5 games. Devon Achane has 1 catch, and he still has 37 fantasy points. So for a player that we thought for a long time, hey, the superpower of Devon Achane, there's 2 of them. 1 is his speed, 2 is the receiving ability. He's proven that he doesn't even need 5 to 8 catches a game, which he has in his bag to get you 20 fantasy points. So Devon Achane, I think, is a strong contender to be the playoff MVP if things continue like they have of late. And of note, Mike McDaniel says he does think that Devon Achane is going to be good to go on Monday night.
I like it. Agree. Jalen Wright looks like he's the number 2 there. So if he's still out there in
good
waivers,
stash. Yep.
and remember they play Monday night. We're gonna be talking about this a lot, I'm sure, on Sunday on FF Now. They play Monday night. So look, guys have setbacks. He might not be as far along come Monday night, and he can then be ruled out, and you could be really stuck in the first round of the playoffs. So if you have Achane, I would scoop up Jalen Wright. He's out there in basically every ESPN league, unless it was last night. Keep him on your bench. Very, very important information this week. Also, I don't think you mentioned this, but their schedule, too, beneficial for him this week. Kind of tough against the Steelers, but the final 2 games, they have the Bengals and the Buccaneers, both top 12 in fantasy points to running back. So like that one, and that leads me to my first point.
Bring it, Mike Clay.
Which is Tua Tagovailoa.
What?
As an interesting name here.
What?
Yeah, and actually, I totally ruined my bit because I was going to do a little blind resume here, and I forgot to do it, guys.
Wait,
Ruined.
We'll try it again, and we'll see if we can
I'll
guess.
pretend.
All right, let's pretend. Let's rewind.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, guys. 45 quarterbacks have 100-plus dropbacks this season. This quarterback ranks 38th in fantasy points per game at 11.1. Any ideas?
I'm going to go with
I have more facts if you're not.
Josh Allen.
Jake
not
Browning?
him.
No, keep helping.
All right,
me
this
out.
quarterback has been under 11 fantasy points in 5 straight and 7 of his last 8 games.
Drake May.
Russell Wilson.
No, that's all wrong too.
Yep.
2 weekly finishes better than 17th this entire season.
Only 2.
Patrick Mahomes.
Ooh. No, not him either.
Probably Lamar Jackson.
This guy has appeared in all 13 games. He started every game for his team this year.
I got it. Jaden
But
Daniels.
only Cam Ward has finished with has fewer fantasy points among quarterbacks. With
Geno
10+
Smith.
starts.
That actually might be a good guess. Actually, Geno Smith might have been a good guess.
That's it. However, despite all those negatives, the next 3 games for this quarterback during the fantasy playoffs are against teams that are top 7 in fantasy points to quarterbacks: the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Bucks. You know the quarterback is?
I'm going to go with Zach Wilson.
Nope.
I would say Quinn Ewers.
No, it's not him either, guys. It's Tua Tagovailoa.
Oh, man.
No idea.
That was
Shocking,
way
right?
off.
Shocking.
That was a a really good bit if you had done it from the jump. There were a lot of good stats in
I
there,
know.
Mike.
I'm really mad at myself for ruining that. I even wrote blind
How
resume.
did you say his last name, by the way?
Tagovailoa?
Tagovailoa.
Tagovailoa?
I actually have a funny story.
Tagovailoa.
I have a funny story. So I don't know, probably like
Be the judge of that.
2 or 3 years ago. Actually, that's a good point. You might not think this is that funny. 2 or 3 years ago, I got a letter in the mail. It was addressed to me and Adam Schefter. Each one of us got this exact same letter. Somehow this person procured our address, which I guess with white pages you can do. And it was a letter. It was a scathing email about how we were mispronouncing Tua's last name.
Oh, yeah. I kind
And
of
he was absolutely infuriated, was this person. And it's not, we were saying Tua Tagovailoa. Now you've got me all jacked up. Viola, you said?
Yeah, I said
Yes.
Viola,
Viola, all right.
Viola Davis.
Tua Tagovailoa. And this guy was so mad because if you look at the way his last name is spelled, it looks almost, if you were to pronounce it phonetically,
Yes.
Tagovailoa, right?
Tagovailoa.
Yeah, whatever. It's a tough name to pronounce no matter how you slice it. But this guy was like, it is tag, it is tag, it is tag. And he was like, while the two of you look at each other and acknowledge how dumb and pathetic you are, you might as well go tell that guy, Mike Greenberg, that he's mispronouncing it as well. Now, I would say this, for my money, there may not be a greater linguist at ESPN than Greeny. The man has the best pronunciation and enunciation skills, maybe of anybody in the history of broadcasting. That guy is, I mean, like, he could probably, like, I don't know, like, decipher different languages better than I can decipher
Probably
the
say
human
tongue
language.
of violin.
Yes, you can at least say that.
Yes.
Violin.
My point. He's excellent at pronouncing things. So I always think back to that. So good job by you for bringing back some dark memories of mine.
Dark memories.
I like that.
Yeah.
Now I really am confused how to say it because now you just said it so
Just
many
say
different
Tua.
Tagovailoa.
Tua. Yeah.
Tua.
So anyway, guys, very easy schedule for him. I don't think it's going to be enough to start him. However, it does apply to the other positions. They have a light schedule for running backs.
Yep.
On HN. Receivers.
Yeah.
Jalen Waddle. Tight ends. Darren Waller, perhaps, although Greg Dulcich has been busy as well. Kicker and their defense as well. So very appealing schedule for Miami. And they could end up being one of them teams that has a huge game or two.
Yeah.
And they're red hot, by the way. I mean, it hasn't been a lot of their offense doing the damage, or certainly their passing game. But they could have a couple big games over the next 3 weeks and push teams into their league championship. So keep an eye on them.
I like that. Like that call there, Mike Clay. I would not have Tua on my list of players that I thought was going to define the playoffs.
I think this is the fun part of this topic.
Agreed. We left it open-ended for that.
Could be anywhere.
It's a weekly game. This guy, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, just think about last week when we were talking about Minnesota, and we're like, it's been so bad. There's no way, right? There's no way. But maybe with the schedule, they actually do something with it. McCarthy had 4 touchdowns last week. I mean, like it's week. It's a weekly game. Really.
Some of us. Not saying who specifically, but some of us did believe in JJ as a playoff stash.
Some of us.
The internet laughed at me.
They did.
We'll see how it looks on Sunday night against the Cowboys.
I was going to say 1 week. 1 week.
Yeah,
Hopefully
we'll
we
see.
get 2.
Maybe an interesting, I want to say test for the Cowboys defense because like I can't make heads or tails of them. It feels like they should be better now, but they're not. They just keep getting run over. So I don't know. We'll see.
I'm going to talk about a player that finally returned. Fantasy managers had been waiting basically 2 months, and now they get their young rookie running back in Omarion Hampton back for the final fantasy playoff stretch. As a reminder of what he did, because it's been a minute since we saw Omarion Hampton. These were his last 3 games going into, unfortunately, the injury that happened.
Okay.
24.9 fantasy points, 27.5 fantasy points, and 13 fantasy points against Washington. In those games, he had 6 catches, 5 catches, and 6 catches, while also touting the ball in a major way. This dude, I know that we talked about it, Field, coming out of the game on Monday night, had some pass protection issues.
Yeah, there's some concerns here.
I saw that. Yeah. When I watch this kid run, though, it just feels like his body, everything that he does, he passes like all the eye tests. He's a big physical runner. He's fast. He's a good pass catcher utilized at the goal line. It feels like Omarion Hampton, if you waited, I know Kamani Vidal is still there.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like he's going to go away. At this point, it kind of seems like they're just going to keep utilizing both of them, especially because they want to keep Hampton healthy. But I see Omarion Hampton as a person that could define the playoffs, because if you were a manager that basically waited 2 full months to get this kid back, you're going into the fantasy playoffs with what I believe is at least an RB2. Mind you, he's got 2 tough matchups. 2 tough matchups in this playoffs, taking on the Chiefs and the Texans. That's weeks 15 and week 17. In week 16, he's got the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, he has a potential top 10 option there as a running back. So I believe that you are going to have a solid RB2 with potential RB1 upside, at least in that middle game, which if you told me going into the fantasy playoffs, I was all of a sudden going to get a potential RB2 back for my squad, that is a guy that could absolutely help define whether or not you can make a farther push into the playoffs. So we haven't seen a lot of them. It's a little bit of a, do I just trust it after 1 week here in a win-or-go-home scenario, but I'm trusting Omarion Hampton.
Yeah. Okay. I'm a little nervous after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go
It's a
for
tough matchup. I acknowledge
he
the
got
matchup.
Snapped by a lot by Kamani Vidal. I mean, the opportunities were similar, but Vidal was ahead in targets and carries. I would expect that to just, flip around like more Hampton. But the fact that it wasn't like 50-50 in snaps, it was just dominated by Vidal, who played pretty well in that game, obviously had the 60-yard catch, makes me a little nervous in the sense of like, this is not a lineup lock yet. He's a starting option, I guess, as a flex, but I moved him down. I have him actually with no teams on a bye. I have him 30th in my running back ranking.
30th.
It wasn't
31% of the snaps.
Yeah,
so 31% of the snaps he
That's
played.
his first game back. Don't we expect that?
I expect more.
I
but
expected
how
more
much
for
more
sure.
is
I
the
think,
question.
yeah. So I wish I had been stronger on this when we were talking about it right after the game yesterday. But 31% of the snaps, I talked about some of the pass protection concerns. Nakobe Dean was lighting him.
Yes, he was.
Up
He was.
in that pass rush. So, and by the way, after the game, like Greg Roman going into the game, Greg Roman was kind of like, we really like what Kamani is doing for us. So I think there's a chance that Kamani maintains
Yeah, that's
that
what I'm
third
worried
down
about.
value at worst a third down value.
Then
hold on. But like, if this becomes a 50-50 split, which would be a big jump from 31% to 69%, there's some optimism here. He's a really talented player. They've got 2 of 3 tough matchups coming up as well. The Chiefs and
this week
also
is
the
part of it.
Texans in week 17. So definitely, but this is why he could define it, because he's so talented. And if he starts playing 60% of the snaps, he could score 15 points a game, no problem.
So I both agree with that because I think he has the boom game in him. Also, if that does happen, that will also define the playoffs for managers that were waiting for 2 full months to get what they thought was an RB2 back. And guess what? It wasn't him. It was the other guy.
No, I think so. It sounds like the alignment we have is that we think he's going to be.
We're all over the place in his rankings.
Yeah, all over the place. I think that he is going to
dropped him after Monday
find
night.
him. Yeah.
Field, you've got him at, and I don't know if this is.
I haven't touched him since Monday
all right,
at like
all right.
9 a.m.
So then I will leave Fields' rankings out of it. I have him as running back 20 right now. Mike, you've got him as running
It's
back
around
30.
where I had him initially, and then Monday night happened, and I was like, okay, well, I do expect him to play more next week, but also they play the Chiefs, which is a factor.
Tough matchup for sure.
And still, Vidal's going to have a role. So, yeah, for me, he ends up at 30. And again, every team's playing this week, 32 teams. So
Yeah.
I have him at the bottom of that, that barrel of starting running backs, but he's in a committee and might be on the short end of the
A little bit of a trust tree right now going into week 15 with only 1 week that we've seen recently. All right,
Pick
Field?
here. He got you here.
Okay.
Will he carry you past this round?
All right, here we go.
Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
For his last 5 games, Jonathan Taylor has a 49.6 point effort. He also has games of 7.7, 8.6, 15.1, and 11.4. I think we would agree that 15.1 is a good enough number that if you got that every week going forward, Jonathan Taylor would not be the reason that you lost your matchup. He also wouldn't be the reason that you won your matchup.
Yep.
The other 3 games would be bad enough where it could lose you your matchup. We talked about the quarterback dynamic in play. How about the matchups coming up here for Jonathan Taylor? So we have this upcoming week, Seattle. We don't like that one at all.
not a bit.
San Francisco.
It's a little bit better.
Week 16 Monday Night Football. You do like that one. It's also at home where there's no concerns about any kind of weather.
Yep.
And then finally, Week 17, the Jaguars, who last check are the best run defense in the NFL and just held Jonathan Taylor. No, they are number 1 in terms of rush defense, like yards allowed per game.
Yards allowed per game.
Number 1. And that's the bread and butter of Jonathan Taylor. He's not a high volume pass catcher. So Jonathan Taylor in week 17 faces the team that just held him to 11.4 fantasy points. Is there dud potential here as soon as this week for Jonathan Taylor?
Doesn't it feel like, and this may be an easily reductive statement, but if you're just an opposing defense, aren't you going to say, let's stop Jonathan Taylor and let 44-year-old Phillip Rivers, who hasn't thrown a real NFL pass in 5 years, beat us?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And if you're like, no, he's just too good. What happened last year?
That's not, yes,
I mean,
we've seen it.
Anthony Richardson's been in there. He hasn't been that good and nearly as good in fantasy. So I'm definitely worried. We've talked about this. I mean, first of all, we predicted this may happen a month ago when we looked ahead at their schedule. And that was before Daniel Jones got hurt. I mean, they were averaging 3-4 touchdowns a game.
Yeah.
They might not score a touchdown this week. They're in Seattle against maybe the best, one of the best defenses.
Top 5
we've seen.
defense at worst.
Yeah, I mean, they're one of the best we've seen in a long time. I mean, this defense is a
Denver,
powerhouse.
Houston, Philly, and Seattle, the 4 defenses. The Rams, the 5 that I'm like, dang.
Yeah, and
If I'm forgetting somebody, please let me know.
Chiefs are good, but
yeah, and by the way, the Eagles defense, I was looking at this, they've had the hardest schedule so far that they've had to deal with. The offenses they face. So
awesome.
and it's a much lighter down the stretch here. But anyway,
can I just say
I'm nervous for sure.
we're all nervous, but we're all also definitely starting him. And there is no way it doesn't feel like, unless you roster CMC and Bijan and Jonathan Taylor, like there's no way you're not putting Jonathan Taylor in your lineup.
But this might be, again, 2024.
Yes.
You might have an RB2 going for because he might have 20, 24 touches, but the efficiency and scoring just might not be there.
The only correction I'll make is that this might be 2024 JT prior to the playoffs, because remember, he went nuclear in the playoffs last year. Yeah, I think sort of the point in some of these conversations is not like, we're not trying to advise sitting these players, more like preparing people mentally for what could be on tap, given the circumstances involved right now. Mike, who is your next pick?
Next one for me is a guy that's very interesting. In fact, it's a perfect time to check this out.
Yes.
Yo, check this out.
Check this out.
Check this out.
Check this out. Check this out. Yo, check this out.
It's time to check this
Yes. That's one.
Check this out.
My favorite part, is the fumble.
By
the way,
unfortunately, that was Jalen Hurts on.
I was just going to say it.
You stole my joke. We worked together way too much. Way too much.
We didn't even get to talk about it. Do you want to talk about the double turnover play?
I don't want to talk about anything about that game.
Okay,
That's understandable.
That's the right.
Yeah,
that's the right call.
it seemed like Hurts. They were like, we're going to be more aggressive this game, and he was just flinging it into tight windows.
He was aggressive.
That was not his game, and that's not going to work. They need to figure something out.
When Jalen Hurts goes as Jameis Winston for Halloween, that's what it looks like. Was that game that we just had?
No, you're right. There was a lot of.
He was just chucking it.
He had as many interceptions in that game as he had all season coming in. I mean,
I think it was more, right? He had 4 interceptions on Monday, with 3 coming into the game, or 2.
That's incredible. Wow. Anyways, keep going. Let's check this out. Mike.
We're going to check this out. Here we go. This is a 2-parter. Check this out. First one. Jacoby Brissett, fellas, has 8 consecutive top 12 fantasy finishes.
Makes no sense.
This season. The next longest streak in the NFL is Trevor Lawrence, who has 4.
Okay.
The longest active. Brissett has 8 in a row. However, the Texans defense has yet to allow a quarterback a weekly finish better than 14th this entire season.
Yeah, I'm not.
This is the immovable object against the unstoppable force.
Yes.
Who's going to win?
I got the Texans defense, and I'll give you a reason why. I think the Texans offense will be better this week than it has been for much of this season. I don't think this is going to be a game where you turn the TV on, it's the middle of the second quarter, and Houston's up 24-0.
So it has happened. Game script last couple games for Cardinals have been that.
You think the Cardinals defense will be better?
No, I'm saying that the Houston offense is not good enough.
Oh, got it.
To put the Cardinals in such a gigantic hole that you're like last week, or the Seattle game where Jacoby Brissett's down before he even blinks, 21-0.
Got it.
Against Seattle,
totally
it was 35-0 at the beginning of the second quarter.
Yeah. But I mean, it's tricky because Brissett, again, this is 2 straight months. He's had a really high floor. He's actually 3rd in fantasy points per game during that stretch. Only Josh Allen and Jackson Dart are ahead of him. So he has been outstanding, and it's all volume. I mean, he's by far number 1 in pass attempts, pass completions, passing yards during that span. But to your point, I mean, the Texans have shut down Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen recently. They've only had 12 touchdowns this season.
Okay, but Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen haven't been a top 12 quarterback for the last 8 weeks in a row. Like, they're a bunch of scrubs.
Yeah,
It feels like you kind of need Woody Marks, CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, Jaden Higgins
Smash.
to help Jacoby Brissett.
Yes.
Yeah, you really do.
Because if this is what Houston has done oftentimes this year, like if it's halftime and it's 10-3, then maybe you're seeing a decent amount of Bam Knight in the first half and not as much of Jacoby Brissett, who last week had 43 passing attempts, because that's what he does.
That's unbelievable.
But the Texans have had leads this year, and still no one has finished top 14. So I just think it's like, I'm with you. I think it's very unlikely, but go ahead, finish your thoughts, and I'll make a final point here.
It's so hard for me because earlier this year, I danced with the devil and decided to play a quarterback against the Texans.
Yeah.
And I feel like once I did that once, and then I've seen other people do it, it's like I just don't.
Don't be that guy. Yeah.
Want to be on the Jacoby Brissett bandwagon so badly because it's such a fun story, and he's been great for this Cardinals offense. This is what we want to see. I just feel like I have to be out in Week 15 because of the Texans.
However, the reason I included him here is because he could define the fantasy playoffs over the next couple of weeks, because we're not starting him this week, but then he has a terrific final slate here. He gets Atlanta at home next week, and then they go to Cincinnati with fantasy championships online. He'll be a streaming option both of those games.
Yep.
Yeah. You could win. People will win championships this year with
because of Jacoby Brissett
as their quarterback. or he'll have a massive dud in Cincinnati. I don't know. We'll see. The weather could be bad, I guess. I don't know. Either way, he's going to define things because he'll be in lineups at the very minimum.
I love
week
that.
17. So don't drop him. Tough matchup this week, but don't drop him because he'll be on the starting radar the next 2 weeks.
You said this was a two-parter.
No, just that.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Check
Top
this
12
out
and
was good for Brissett, but this matchup's brutal.
Love that.
Okay, what do you got? We'll pick up the pace.
Yeah.
Apologies for
Bucky
dragging.
Irving has had 2 nice games in his return. I think it's set up really nicely for fantasy managers here that would want to utilize him. After missing 2 months, managers have gotten 2 games over 16 fantasy points. As a part of those 2 games, he had 19 touches and 17 touches and a touchdown in both. But the most surprising thing to me was how little run he actually had as the lead back in both of those games. Under 55% of the snaps in both of those games, actually under 50% of the snaps in week 14. Yeah. Mind you, it's still freaking Bucky Irving, and we've been waiting to get him back in our starting lineup. Really great matchups this time. Falcons, Panthers, and the Dolphins for the next 3. Dolphins and Falcons both allowing over 130 rushing yards per game to the opposing team. That's bottom 10 for both of those defenses. If you waited, again, just like you talked about, you had themes. My next one, you're going to notice it as well. If you had to wait and you had this running back on your squad and you're like, man, I barely squeaked into the fantasy playoffs, Bucky Irving in a spot, even though he has not had a huge snap share recently, I think still to be the guy for your squad, a set it and forget it RB2, potential top 10 running back, but I have him as a high-end RB2 at least this week for the fantasy playoffs.
Last week he had a little bit of, I think like a minor injury, missed a snap or 2, and then he kind of didn't play a lot the rest. You saw a lot more Rachaad White, Sean Tucker touchdown. Yeah. I think that's kind of what happened there. The week before he was obviously super productive, and to your point, it seems like he's fine now. The schedule is very light. This was my pause in trading him actually in the Focus League. I ended up doing
it's a nice schedule.
Monra, but the schedule is very appealing down the stretch.
Yes, agreed with that. I'm going to try and pull up while Field goes next, just so I can see if Bucky Irving didn't have a bunch of snaps either in like the 3rd or 4th quarter. And as far as getting hurt,
I felt like he played a lot more in the first half, and then we saw a lot of Rachaad White in the second half.
Second half of that one.
We have the first practice. No, we've had practice reports the past couple of days, and there hasn't been anything for Bucky on there.
I think he's fine now. I'm just saying I think that somewhat explains why they sort of limited him in the second half. It certainly felt like that.
My next player is you got here probably in spite of him, but can he now carry you the rest of the way? That player is Saquon Barkley, who we again kind of forecasted this because of his schedule a month or so ago. Last Monday night, he took off against the Chargers, which was the most difficult of his upcoming matchups. He had 18.2 fantasy points. He did not catch a pass for the 2nd straight game. He's never had that happen in his entire NFL career prior to weeks 13 and 14, but the next 3 games are tasty, tasty matchups. He has the Raiders, the Commanders, and the Bills over the next 3 weeks. Those teams right now ranked 24th, 27th, and 26th as far as fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs. As in, the closer to 32, the better for the running back that you have on hand. Yep. So while it's hard for me to fully buy into this Eagles offense for all the obvious reasons this year, if ever there was a time for Saquon to have some vintage moments, it would be over the next 3 games when A, Philadelphia has a lot to play for, and B, the schedule sets up beautifully.
Yeah, I'm going to jump ahead here because we overlap a little bit because I also have Saquon and the Eagles here, but it applies to the other positions as well because you'll look at receivers. Yep. They have the Raiders this week, 3rd most points to receivers in Washington's top 10. Bills are mid-pack. They're going to have to throw against them more than they normally would, so that's good. Quarterbacks, this week they get the Raiders, should be fine. That's in Philly. They're kind of mid-pack against quarterbacks because teams don't have to throw against them, but fine matchup. Then they get Washington, outstanding matchup. And then Bills are a tough one for Jalen Hurts come week 17. That's going to be a tricky one. The Eagles are in Buffalo week 17. And then tight ends. Raiders actually have been good against tight ends. But then Washington has led the 5th most fantasy points. The Bills, the fewest. So for Dallas Goedert, tough slate the rest of the way. But running backs, receivers, and quarterbacks, for the most part, are very good, other than maybe, Hurts in week 17. We're going to have a conversation about that.
We'll talk about that.
Comes.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about another running back, guys, another running back that you were waiting on. You drafted really high, potentially maybe in the 5th or 6th round. And then in the middle of the season, let me set the narrative here. Weeks 9, 10, and 11, the other running back got hurt. Ramondre Stevenson went down, and it finally left us with Travion Henderson being able to have the lead role to himself. What did he give us? 2 weeks. 28 fantasy points and 32 fantasy points. We were rejoicing as fantasy managers. And then Ramondre Stevenson came back, had 2 games before the bye. Ramondre Stevenson came back and they played the Cincinnati Bengals and the Giants off of those 2 huge games for Travion Henderson. And did he build upon them, my friends? He did not.
No.
11.1 and 11.6 fantasy points with Ramondre Stevenson after 2 awesome weeks. Yeah. It was basically surrounded by a couple of 11-point games there. But now, coming out of the bye in week 14, we haven't heard about him in a little bit. He's got a nice matchup. I mean, both of these running backs have a nice matchup down the stretch. Week 15 against the Bills, 7th most fantasy points to running backs this year. Week 16 against the Ravens, 11th most. And then championship week against the Jets, 3rd most points to the running backs this year. There's a part of me that feels like even though we have seen more Ramondre Stevenson last game in week 13, week 14 was a bye, that we're at a point where when this team needs to be able to get a dub, especially for fantasy managers, we're not starting Ramondre Stevenson. We're starting Travion Henderson. Patriots are starting Ramondre Stevenson. Yeah. We're not. I've got Ramondre. And part of that is because Ramondre Stevenson has more carries, more catches, more rushing yards, more scrimmage yards, more rushing touchdowns, more receiving touchdowns, and maybe most importantly, less fumbles than Ramondre Stevenson does. So this is one of those situations where, like, I get it. Ramondre is the guy. They're going to keep doing that. But if I'm going to start one of these 2 Patriots running backs down the stretch, Ramondre is the guy that has that game-breaking. Travion is the guy that has that game-breaking ability.
I would agree on that part. I don't know that I have a lot of optimism for a ton of ceiling here. Am I wrong? I don't know. Where do you land?
I agree, and that's where I was going to go with this. Is that first of all, we should point out that while Anderson has been the much more efficient rusher, Stevenson has been a substantially more effective pass catcher. He's been good in the receiving game, so I don't think that's going to go away. And the other thing is, if they play 10 games together, right? Yeah. This season. In those games, Stevenson is averaging 8.8 fantasy points per game, has reached 11 3 times. Henderson in those 10 games, averaging 7.5 fantasy points per game. He has not reached 13 fantasy points in any of those 10 games this season.
I agree with you. So I think you guys are missing the point here. The whole point is fantasy managers have been waiting all season to be able to say, I can utilize Travion Henderson. We got a glimpse of it for 2 weeks. And now you get 3 sick matchups down the playoffs in which you may have had to start him even if you didn't want to. Yeah. And I think he will define the playoffs because you may have to start him when you don't want to. Or it may be one of those things where you don't start him against one of these teams and he does have that boom game because, by the way, Bills and Jets have combined to give up 9 games of over 25 fantasy points. 5 of those games have been over 30 fantasy points with a ceiling game against the Bills of over 40 fantasy points in week 10. I don't think that Travion does that, but it just feels like in this situation, fantasy manager is going to have to make a choice. Do I want to trust Travion Henderson in a win or go home week? You've been waiting all season to have to decide, is this guy worth it? Yeah. I think he's going to define the playoffs from that perspective.
I probably have a better option. Yeah.
What do you have him this week? Do you know?
I'm 26.
Do you know where you have him?
I have him 26, Stevenson 32.
Yeah. I have Ramondre. I have Travion as running back 19.
Yeah, I saw. Was that you? I saw someone had him in the top 20. I thought that was bold.
Yeah.
Bold, but
last category for me is they may be healthy, but are they effective? And I'm talking about a pair of quarterbacks. We'll see whether Jaden Daniels is healthy enough to play on Sunday, but Dan Quinn kind of downplayed the severity of that elbow re-aggravation this past Sunday. The other one is, of course, Lamar Jackson. Lamar, who has played for 4 straight games and finally got off the schneid, but I want you guys to guess, just arbitrarily throw a number at the most passing yards that Jaden Daniels has in a game this season. He has played in 7 games. He left 1 early. Yep.
700.
Excuse me.
I would say 245.
700. No, you guys do that to me. Look
I know.
He rolled his eyes at me.
It's true. I know.
I one time.
You do the bit that we do to you.
I do the bit.
Where I do it to you, though, is when you're like, hey, this guy sucked all year. How many games do you think he's had over 20 fantasy points? And it's like, I don't know, 30?
Because you both entered into the question the same way.
But you're doing the same thing. You're suggesting it's a low number. Okay.
Yeah, so but how low is low?
He's the only member of the 700 club. All right, keep going.
233. So
close.
I talked about this yesterday. Like, Jaden Daniels hasn't been healthy. He also hasn't played that great. He has yet to reach 22 fantasy points in a game all season. Lamar finally broke through after that 3-game slump of 7.22 or fewer fantasy points in 3 straight. But Lamar this past week, even getting over 21 fantasy points, didn't look like vintage Lamar by any stretch. So the question is, these guys may play on Sunday, but are we getting top 5 fantasy value from Lamar and Jaden in cushy matchups? Cincinnati and the Giants for those 2 QBs.
Well, Jackson just played the Bengals and didn't look so hot.
That's
right. It was a rare down game for an offense against the Bengals. And you mentioned Daniels has the Giants. So if I have Jaden, I'm probably firing him up.
Yeah. I got to be honest. We tried this last week. Maybe we pay off a couple of board bets here real quickly because we all said, hey, guess what? There's no way Lamar Jackson's going to be outside the top 12, right?
And we were
We were in fact wrong, as he was quarterback 14 on the week.
No, he wasn't.
Am I looking at the wrong note?
He's
We
quarterback
were
8.
right. We got that one right.
Quarterback 8 in week 14.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. I saw 14 on the sheet. All right.
I built you up for excitement. You were
No.
like, no, you were wrong. But we were right the whole time.
All right, there we go. Quarterback 8. Hey, so we are trusting Lamar Jackson now, guys. Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, I have him back inside my top 12 once again this week. My point is that, like, you know, when you
What a limb.
I know.
Yeah.
Top 12, guys.
But do you want to pay off these 3 board bets real quick? You guys got the players or
Let's
no?
do it. Saquon Barkley, we said, was he going to be inside or outside the top 17 of running backs? I said he would be inside,
You said outside the top 17.
and he finished inside. He finished as running back 7.
Yep.
So win for Field and I.
Field and Mike got a win there. Field also said Justin Jefferson was not going to be a top 18 wide receiver. Mike and I said he would be a top 18 wide receiver. He was wide receiver 77 on the
He
week.
had 11 yards. That's inside 18.
That's good.
Okay, that's good. Right?
That's not good.
2-0,
Not
2-0,
good. All right. And then the Lamar Jackson one in which we all won.
By the way, if you told me McCarthy was going to throw 4 touchdowns,
I
would have been
know!
like,
Wait, did he throw 4 or did he throw 2?
So
He threw 4.
that was 4.
He
Was
threw
that
4 touchdowns. Or maybe he threw 3. He threw 2 to Oliver and 1 to TJ Hawkinson.
Maybe it was 3. I don't know why I thought it was 4.
Yeah.
Maybe
One
they
to
scored.
Hawkinson.
They scored 4 touchdowns. He
Yeah.
did 3. Yeah.
Yeah, was there a Jordan Mason rushing touchdown? That's what it
yeah.
was.
My bad. Okay.
No, that's great because we were definitely starting
Anyway.
Jordan Mason in that
If
game
you
as
told
well.
me the Vikings would score 4 touchdowns, I would have been like, of course, Jefferson caught 1 and probably 80 yards, but nope.
That's the frustration.
Oh, man, Lamar.
All right.
Man.
Well, I'm going to dive in. I got a few more players to define the season. Do you guys
go
mind
for it.
if I
I'm
go
done.
with
Yeah.
another one?
Yeah, please. Let's rip them.
This is going to be a little bit outside the box. Hope this is the outside the box part of this segment, but
Okay.
I have
So is
Drake
my next one.
London as a player that will define the fantasy playoffs.
Because
You want
one
to know
way or
why?
the other, right? Yeah.
Because he's either not going to play and you will have had a guy that was wide receiver 4 up until he got hurt, and then you're now playing the playoffs without the guy that got you there. That is certainly a defining moment. Or
He's all but certainly out for tomorrow.
this week.
Missed again on practice on Tuesday.
DNP, and it is a Thursday night game, so we'll talk about that, obviously. But if Drake London is going to be out, I think it is not just a Drake London. I mean, if he's back, he will define the playoffs because you'll get a guy that's potentially.
Maybe.
This is
I don't know, with
the
Kirk Cousins,
conversation.
Are we sure about that?
This is the conversation. Is he still the top 5 guy because he's going to have Kirk Cousins
Would not
under
rank him as
center?
a top 5 guy.
He's a
Top 10?
But he is a yes, though.
He is a yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
He
a
is a yes.
starter,
So
you'll
yes.
be starting
A
him.
top 10 guy, a top 5 guy, I'm not so sure about that.
However, because of the fact that Drake London is hurt, I actually believe that one of the players that will define the fantasy playoffs is, I can't
I
believe
know
I'm
where you're
doing
going
this,
with this.
Kyle Pitts.
Maybe.
At the tight end position. London was hurt in week 11. I want to give you the last 3 weeks. Week 12,
Okay.
Kyle Pitts had 5 targets. That actually led the team. Okay, that was the week in which Darnell Mooney had like 3 for 73 and a touchdown. That offense looked awful, but it was Kyle Pitts that led the team with 5 targets. Week 13, 7 for 82 on 8 targets, 15.2 fantasy points. Most importantly, led all players in targets and led all pass catchers in fantasy points. And then week 14, 6 for 90 on 10 targets. Again, another 15-point game, a 3rd straight game in which he led the team in targets and led the team in fantasy points as a receiver. This is a situation just because of how bad the tight end position is, even though we don't love Kirk Cousins being under center for us. I feel like Kyle Pitts is at least a top 10 to 12 tight end option as long as Drake London isn't in there, because literally nobody else has stepped up as a receiver in this game or from this team other than Bijan Robinson. It is just Kyle Pitts. So it feels a little dangerous starting Kyle Pitts there, but I think he is a player that if you needed him could define it. Mostly that's though because of Drake London, because his absence opened up that opportunity.
Yeah.
Kyle Pitts is going to make a ton of money this offseason.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you're probably right. I would agree. He right now where I have him ranked assumes London plays, but he'll go way up if London's out. So keep an eye on that. I'll change out later if London's out of practice again today. But I thought that was interesting. I don't know if you guys had some trouble with tight end ranking this week, because after you get
Every week?
the top 3 is easy with Kittle, McBride, and Bowers. But after that, I mean, it could have been anyone. I think I only have 4 tight ends as lineup blocks, and one's Harold Fannin, which in Cleveland, that's actually my next point, so I'll leave that there. But Hunter Henry, Goddard, which he went way up after seeing all those targets on Monday, which helped.
Yeah.
But Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely have good matchups with Travis Kelce slumping. Joke Farderson is struggling. Theo Johnson is in there coming off the bye. Kincaid, Juwan Johnson. I mean, it's a mess.
It is a mess.
It is a mess after the top 3 or 4 tight ends right now. Rondé Gatson, he's plummeted. So it's
Loveland trending up if Roman is out.
Wouldn't that be nice?
I don't think I've ever had this few lineup blocks in the
tight end
playbook
position
at tight end, because it's wide open.
Who's next for you?
Next one for me is the Browns.
Okay.
We're talking about Shador Sanders
Thought about it.
and Jerry Jeudy. Could that connection have some value during the fantasy playoffs? We talked about this a month ago. The Browns have a very appealing schedule down the stretch that continues over the next 3 weeks. Fifth easiest rest of season schedule, in fact, for quarterbacks and wide receivers. Shador looked good last week. He just continues to get better and better. 364 yards, 3 touchdowns, also ran for a touchdown. I'm a little pessimistic that he'll be a streaming option. They did play Tennessee. They beat up on them at home fine, but it is a light schedule. And Jerry Jeudy, now, look, he only has 2 games with 12 fantasy points this season. Both were somewhat predictable. Yeah. It was that Jets game, the first game Sauce Gardner got traded, or after Sauce got traded. And then last week against the Titans. Last 3 games, Bears this week, then they have the Bills, and then they have the Steelers. So we've talked about it, giving up a ton to receivers. So I'm not going to start Sanders, but I think he might be good enough that guys like Harold Fannin and Jerry Jeudy could be better in fantasy. And one quick note on the Browns, Jerome Ford to IR, low-key important in fantasy because he leads the team in targets out of the backfield and routes. Some of that's going to go to Quinshon Judkins. Some will go to Dylan Sampson. But Judkins, I think, has a little more involvement in the passing game. He had that long catch last week.
He did.
Even 2 more targets a game would be huge for him because that's been kind of crushing his floor. So I moved Judkins up actually a couple spots there in Chicago this week, but Sanders just playing competent ball could be enough for Judkins, Jeudy, Fannin to be starting caliber in fantasy down the stretch.
It will be tough, I feel like, to start potentially Shador, but like you're saying with the rest of those guys, if he can give a nice enough floor to those guys down the stretch, at least a flex option, right? Or for Harold Fannin, given how bad tight end has been, like if he can just give us, what we've seen from Harold Fannin, he's been a nice thing for us.
His usage is ridiculous.
I want to ask you, and this is not to give everything away, but you've got the Browns going which direction in your mock draft?
Not a quarterback. So they have the 4th and the 27th pick right now.
Okay.
By the way, that Travis Hunter trade compensation feels a little bit different right now, given how good the Jaguars have been, even without Travis Hunter making much of an impact. But the interesting part about the quarterbacks in this year's draft class is that we, A, don't know how many of these guys are going to declare, and B, it's just not a great quarterback class. I have to say something, though. The 2024 draft class has warped expectations so much for what a good quarterback draft class looks like. Like there's a chance, like if I told you any of Drake May, Jaden Daniels, or Caleb Williams becomes an all-pro one day, would you buy any or all of them becoming an all-pro one day?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, like it's easy to see with Jaden nearly was last year. Drake May might well be this year.
Yeah.
And Caleb could get there too, right?
Nix has been pretty good. I mean,
right. So like that class is so good that you're like, yeah, there's only 2 good quarterbacks in this year's draft class. That's like the norm. Anyways, let's move forward here. Dang,
that's funny you mentioned that because like Phillip Rivers was one of those, right? With Big Ben and who else was in that one?
Yes. Eli.
Yeah. I mean, once in a while they come along, and we need those injections every so often.
We sure do.
We do.
2004 draft class.
You're up next, my friend.
Talking about them. Up next.
Yep.
The injury question mark. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. and it's his health, perhaps because of what it means for Marvin Harrison Jr., but also perhaps for what it means for Jerry Rice. Michael Wilson.
Honest mistake.
Yes, happens to the rest of us.
That's fair.
So, again, I mean, it may not matter at all this week because they play the Texans, who Mike has noted have allowed, 2 receivers to get to 13 fantasy points all year?
Yeah, the only 2 to get to 18 were JSN and Nakua. So Wilson
maybe
could
Wilson could get
he's
that,
in that
yes.
category when Harrison doesn't.
We have no idea on this Marvin Harrison Jr. injury, but if Michael Wilson is in as wide receiver 1, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is out with no Greg Dortch and no Zay Jones, I know those guys don't matter as much, but still, they're playing.
They still take targets.
Right? Yes. How many wideouts do you prefer to Michael Wilson in a not Texans matchup with no Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I mean, he's certainly in the top 10, 12. For
Yeah, I was going to say maybe 10. Maybe.
He's definitely there.
It's definitely a top 10 wide receiver. So this injury for Marv looms very large, and maybe not as much this week, but as we get to week 16 and 17 when they play the Falcons and the Bengals, you can't tell me that Michael Wilson Jr., if there's no Marv, wouldn't be inside your lineup.
This is such a defining situation because everyone that rosters Michael Wilson Jr. is like, please, Marvin Harrison Jr., do not play this week. And we're not rooting for an injury, but like you just don't want him to play because Michael Wilson is not the same guy when Marvin Harrison Jr. is in there. Seems like Marv can still be a fine low-end flex play even with Michael Wilson. It's just not really the same on the other side of it. It's a massive situation for fantasy managers that have both of those wide receivers going into week 15.
More to come tomorrow in the Shadow Report.
Yeah. Love that. I've only got one other player,
Okay,
so
you
I'm
do
going to
yours.
allow you guys
Okay,
to go first, and then I will close it out here.
What do
So,
you got
Mike, do you want to do
left,
another
Mike?
one?
I've got two left.
I have two. I
Yep,
can be
you go
quick
first.
here. Dak Prescott. Quarterback 4 this season. So he's been good overall. The problem is he's been on a roller coaster. He started off really slow. Then he had 22 plus in 4 straight. Then he had 2 duds again. And now he's at 18 plus in 4 straight games. But the schedule is kind of tough.
It
the next
is.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
They host the Vikings, 3rd fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Then they have the Chargers, 2nd fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But then they play Washington in week 17. So it's kind of one of them things like you might want to stream. Like I have Dak 10th this week. You might not want to start him. So, but if you can get past these next 2 weeks with guys from this offense, you get to week 17, they have Washington. I'm in this spot actually in the FF Now League where I have George Pickens and Jake Ferguson, who's been slumping now for
Joke Farderson.
So it's been it's rough. So it's going to be a tough slate for this offense the next couple of weeks.
Yeah,
but
agreed.
if you can get to week 17, huge.
On top of that, I do think because of how many playmakers they have, how bad their defense is, like Dak probably can get to like 14 each of these next 2 weeks, even a more difficult match.
What's the crushing game? Like, do you have
I
his
think
game
crushing
log?
is 10 or fewer.
What is
11 or fewer.
has he had any games like
Yeah,
that?
he had like a 7 and a 15, I think, recently. That was a 2-game slide, and then he came back. So he, for the most part, he's been okay. But what's tricky about this offense is you have Dak, yes, but you also have Javonte Williams.
Yep.
You have 2 receivers that you want to start, and Jake Ferguson. Like they're not all going to eat if he has 14 fantasy points. So
Correct.
You have to
you're gonna-
specify
you're gonna
which
be-
receivers because Ryan Flanoy is on this roster too.
I know.
CeeDee Lamb, obviously, his concussion does loom large for this week.
Yes, very clear.
This is this is my last time talking about this player, Justin Jefferson.
Oh,
Like I
one.
don't really know if there's much to say, but like if you get completely irrelevant, useless Justin Jefferson once again this week and next, then you're probably losing.
can I
Great
ask Mike?
schedule,
Like because we talked about this earlier this week. How are you projecting Justin Jefferson here in Week 15?
Against the Cowboys.
Yeah, that's part of why he still hangs 12th in my rankings. Because the target share, I did move the target share down a little bit from where he's been this season, but they're playing the Cowboys, and they've been still the most fantasy points allowed to receivers this season, 4th most over the last 8 weeks, 3rd most over the last month. They're still just getting crushed by that position. So I think it's still Justin Jefferson. He's one of them guys, especially after last week. I almost feel like he's going to push for double-digit targets this week.
They
They're
better.
going to try their best. Dallas could have Trevon Diggs back this week, but I'm guessing he'll be limited in this one. So I think Jefferson, I don't want to go as far to say he'll be vintage Jefferson, but bounce back week, startable in fantasy.
Can I do my last one so you guys can make fun of me for
Yeah.
misinterpreting the extra?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. The coach that pulls all the levers,
Whoa.
Sean McVay, who is not a player. But I do want people to hear me out here for a second, because how many offenses do you have trust in that are going to score a lot of points every week more than Los Angeles?
Maybe.
None.
Very few, right?
Yeah,
Like
very
Their
few.
floor is ridiculous because they also feed the same guys every week, too.
but the question is, which guys do they feed in a given week, right? So if they get to the goal line, like think about how much influence Sean McVay has from the 5-yard line and in, right? If he says, all right, we're just going to run the football, hand it off to Kyron and or Blake Corum, that, like we've seen Devontae Adams score a zillion touchdowns. When Devontae Adams doesn't score, it ain't pretty, right? Like he's like, I don't know.
That's because Nakua between the 20s does all of it.
Right.
Everything.
Yeah. Right. So
Everything.
you need Sean McVay to be like, all right, we're calling a Devontae play at the goal line for Devontae to cash in and be a top 20 wide receiver.
Is it fair now to say that, because I think we've said this, like 3 of the 4 superstars that we love on this team are basically touchdown dependent in Devontae Williams, Devontae Adams, Kyron Williams, and Blake Corum. Like all 3 of those guys, you need to be able.
Yeah, I mean, we're not starting Corum, though, right?
I think he's closer than you.
We were talking about this
He has
yesterday.
like one good game this year. It was last week.
I was more towards Mike's side of like, it's going to be hard. I think the value of Corum is more about what he takes away from Kyron than it is about the standalone value there. But he has flash this year.
I don't think that we get to know which one of the drives that they're on is the drive for Blake or the drive for, like, that's the thing. Like the scoring drive could be a Blake Corum drive.
Isn't that an F1 show, Drive to Survive? Or
Yeah,
something?
sure is. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Look at that.
Showing my
Look at you,
knowledge.
Fields Yates.
Yeah. Racing.
Really good.
Resident racing fan.
Yes, correct. But so Sean McVay does have a lot of influence
100%.
just because he decides who is getting the football. They're going to score touchdowns. And if they say we're going to run the ball, then it's good things for Kyron Williams, bad things for Devontae. And if the inverse happens, then not so good if you're starting Kyron Williams. My
Matthew
last one, I'm
Stafford
done.
feels like he's lineup lock, though, for the fantasy
I
playoffs
have
at
him
this
in there
point.
top
with how
5.
he's-
Yeah.
However, Seattle next week.
Yeah, that's going to be
huge.
That's a massive,
huge start to the semifinals.
Yeah, but we like Detroit. They're going to throw a lot, and Detroit beat up in the secondary. They'll be good there. And Atlanta with everything on the line. Week 17, good spot as well.
Yeah.
All right, Michael, what do you got for your
last one for me, fellas, is the Broncos. Tough schedule, especially for the running backs. Hardest remaining schedule for running backs. They have the Packers at home this week. Then they also are at home against Jacksonville, which we just talked about earlier. Maybe the toughest matchup in the league. And then they go to Kansas City in week 17. A brutal schedule for RJ Harvey.
On Christmas Day, by the way.
Christmas Day. 21 plus fantasy points in each of his last 2 games. The volume's been good. And the schedule is pretty much neutral for the other positions. It's just the running backs position that's so hard. So we're going to need they might lean a little bit toward the pass, but certainly we're going to need Harvey to be busy in the passing game because I'm not sure he's going to produce a lot on the ground.
I concur. One of my takeaways from the weekend was like Harvey looks good again, but
The schedule
might be going down.
Games are tough.
What do you got, Daniel, for the last one?
On my last one, before I give you the last one, I'm just going to give you really quickly my favorite playoff matchup.
Okay.
My favorite, because I was looking through. A lot of this is like trying to figure out who my favorite playoff matchup is. Who do I like this week? Who do I like moving forward? Week 17, championship week. Trey McBride plays the Cincinnati Sad Cats in just the best matchup of the season.
Amazing. Yeah, I know. I noted down a couple week 17 specific notes here, including Jacoby Brissett.
Dude, like it's just the idea that like Trey McBride, the number 1 tight end in fantasy, gets them in week 17 in a championship week means probably he's going to score 4.3 points, but it's such a good matchup. I just wanted to say that. All right, my last player here is someone that absolutely could just dominate fantasy games for fantasy managers. Tyler Algier.
Justin Allgaier?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Tyler Algier.
It is Jahmyr Gibbs, guys. It is Jahmyr Gibbs.
Potential playoff MVP, Jahmyr Gibbs. Yeah. Yep.
In 2025, only 4 players have multiple games over 35 fantasy points. Okay. Josh Allen, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Allen, Jonathan Taylor, and Christian McCaffrey have all done it twice since the start of the season. Jahmyr Gibbs has done it 4 times since week 7.
No doubt.
Week 7, 218 yards plus 3 catches for 2 touchdowns, 36.8 fantasy points. Week 10, 172 total yards, 3 catches, 3 touchdowns, 38.2 fantasy points. Week 12, 264 yards, 11 receptions for 3 touchdowns, 55.4 fantasy points. And last week in week 14, 120 total yards for another 7 catches, 3 touchdowns, and 37 fantasy points. It is not a cake playoff schedule. Like they've got some really difficult matchups against the Rams, the Steelers, the Vikings. They are all top 12 defenses against running backs this year. However,
Good. I'll go finish with that. Yeah.
Nobody has just had the winning weeks that Jahmyr Gibbs has had, and the Detroit Lions have had to rely on him in a major way, especially as a pass catcher. 4 games over 35 fantasy points since week 7, heading into the fantasy playoffs. Feels like a guy that absolutely could define your fantasy matchups.
You just did your mock draft today over at ESPN.com. Check it out. If you're doing a mock for the...
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Grab that a while. You're doing a mock draft for fantasy drafts next year. Jahmyr Gibbs, first overall?
Oh.
I think he is a strong... He's 1 point per game behind Christian McCaffrey.
He's definitely on the short list. I mean, it's hard to... Yeah, and age would work in his favor, all that. So.
I think I'd be hard-pressed to go against him right now.
Yeah, I agree. Starts of the week time, or the punishment for the starts of the week time, because last week I finished with a measly 43.76 fantasy points.
Oh, that's tough. Do you remember who you started? Field
I definitely
Yates?
had Dalton Kincaid. I also had other players that
We had some other players. Maybe we have do we have a full screen for it? We'll give it a check out.
We all had the same quarterback.
We all had Lamar. So
Here we go. So starts of the week.
Yep.
All right, Field, why don't you start?
Lamar Jackson, Chris Rodriguez, A.D. Mitchell, and Dalton Kincaid. Good for 43.76 fantasy points. Obviously, Daniel had Lamar as well with Bijan, Jordan Addison, and Brenton Strange. Bijan did not have a great game, but Daniel got 46.36. Mike had a solid week last week, which was Lamar plus Chase Brown for 18.5, Chris Godwin, and Brenton Strange. So
Got a win. I needed it.
Yep.
All right, you check out the season records.
Wow.
Field, technically the biggest winner.
I don't recall having 4 losses. I have 3 for sure. I had to run a marathon. I had to.
Oh, you had to run a marathon. You had a sour starts. We got to change your start.
Yeah, this is your 4th, right? Then we
And this is the 4th one. Yeah, there we go. All right, no big deal. All right, here we go.
All right, just challenge them. That's
Sore
fine.
loser. Here we go.
spin of the wheel is the mini golf challenge.
Oh, nice. I don't know what that is, but I like
That
mini golf.
means that you have got to, I believe, and please producers correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the point is you have to mini golf until you get a hole in one, and you cannot stop until you get a hole in one.
That sounds like a treat, not a punishment.
Sort of.
Sounds great.
I guess it depends on how good at putting you are, Field.
Do we have
mini golf
is there anywhere
closed, so
that's
I think you're
open?
gonna have to go
Yeah.
outside here.
They're closed, but we can still do it. Yeah, it's just outdoors right now at the ESPN mini green. You'll just have to bundle up, Field.
It's only 6 degrees.
It's only 6 degrees
we'll have to
outside.
pick a
We'll have to
distance and
find
get
a
you up
place. There's got to be an indoor putting greens, or indoor putting place somewhere, right? We'll find
I
something.
feel like
for that.
Bryson DeChambeau, who did that challenge where he was able to take a one wedge every day until he hit a hole in one over his house. Ridiculous.
How many days did it take? Do you remember?
It was definitely not that many. It wasn't like the first try. I think it was like maybe like day 16 or something.
That's
That's a lot.
absurd.
Did he put his? Did he put any holes through his house?
No,
along the way.
no, it's like disgusting how good these guys are at golf.
That's ridiculous.
I have broken many windows with golf balls, and these guys are sort of aiming for their house and still not hitting the windows.
That's one thing that I don't do is just aim for houses with golf balls. Why do you? Is that a thing?
No, I don't. I'm saying that I just suck at golf.
Oh, got
So
it. Okay,
sometimes-
that makes more sense. That checks out. That one checks out. All right. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Can't wait to see what this putt-putt challenge is going to be, Field.
Hey.
We'll figure some things out there.
We'll make up rules now.
Yeah, love that. And also, we're very excited to be able to have even more for you tomorrow and Friday. A reminder, as you guys know, playoffs are at our doorstep. It is going to be a huge, huge week 15. We will make sure that you are all set up with everything that we have both Thursday and Friday. All right, that's going to do it for us. Today's show was presented by Wingstop. Don't forget to love each other and be kind to yourself. You guys, you deserve it. We'll see you guys tomorrow.